ask for better weather for this sermon. The thunder, the lightning, the rain, the doom, the gloom. Today, I'm going to work on a series, and I'm going to do this more into this next week. I have that as well. And the series that I'm working with is going to be basically helping pose one question. How would you know the Messiah? In other words, when Jesus comes back, not if, but when. There are people that would like to say if, but let's go to the when, because we believe it's going to happen. When Jesus comes back, how are you going to know he is the Messiah? Not just a Messiah, not the Antichrist, but he is the Messiah. And so, to start that, we're going to go all the way back into Isaiah, 700 years before Jesus came. And that's where the basis of most of this stuff is going to be. However, I also need to kind of give something a little bit after Isaiah that does apply to the things that Isaiah said, so we can actually use something from the future after Isaiah to interpret what Isaiah is actually talking about. But it's kind of interesting because even within that, then we have the book of Revelation that is much farther out in the future even, but yet these passages all tie together. And so to start with that, the first thing I'm going to do is we have to remember that Nebuchadnezzar had a dream, and in this dream he saw this statue, and the head was gold, arms of silver, belly and thighs of brass, legs of iron, feet of iron, and part of clay. And that a stone was cut out, and there's all these images. This is in Daniel 2nd chapter. And so you can read through there and see all this, but it talks about this. So Daniel was summoned, and he said, okay, can you interpret this dream? And Daniel starts breaking it down. He said, well, the head is of gold. Well, actually, that's you. You are this head of gold. So Babylon was that. And then he goes, and after that, another kingdom will rise inferior to you, and another kingdom of brass, fourth kingdom made of iron. And then he talks about clay. He talks about feet and toes, part of iron, part of clay. Kingdom divided, which, like toes are divided. So we've got that. And there are 10 toes. So he's given all this imagery very quickly in Daniel. But we go back to Isaiah, or as they like to say in Chariots of Fire, Isaiah, which either one is good. I love it. But in Isaiah 32, and a lot of this is apocalyptic because he's talking about the future. He said, behold, a king shall reign in righteousness, and princes shall rule in judgment. And a man shall be as a hiding place from the wind, and a covert from the tempest, as rivers of water in a dry place, as the shadow of a great rock in a weary land. So he's talking there, the storm imagery, that rivers of water in a dry place. And I grew up in a desert, and the interesting things is in places that don't have a lot of water all the time, the vegetation doesn't grow except for certain types of vegetation. But then when rain comes, it comes massive amounts that wash out a lot of the gullies and things like that. And so those are areas that can be deadly if you're camping in them, and all of a sudden there's a thunderstorm because it can come up from the hills and then wash everything out. So he's given this imagery of this. And the eyes of them that see shall not be dim, and the ears of them that hear shall hearken. The heart also of the rash shall understand knowledge, and the tongue of the stammerers shall be ready to speak plainly. And so he's talking about this king that's going to reign in righteousness. He's going to rule. But he says these things about, what's going on. The vile person shall be no more called liberal, nor the curled said to be bountiful. For the vile person will speak villainy with his heart, and will work iniquity, to practice hypocrisy, and to utter error against the Lord, and to make empty the soul of the hungry, and he shall cause the drink of the thirsty to fail. And he's saying that people need something. They need food and they need drink, but these people are evil. The instruments of the curl are evil. He devises wicked devices to destroy the poor with lying words. Kind of makes me wonder at times when I hear that, that's a passage of what are we talking about? Are we talking about politicians? Talk a good talk, say they're going to help everybody, and in the end, people suffer. But the liberal devises liberal things, and by liberal things shall he stand. Judgment and restoration. That's the next section. Rise up, ye women that are at ease. Hear my voice, ye careless daughters. Give ear unto my speech. And so Isaiah is talking about in the future. Be ready. Many days and years shall be troubled, ye careless women, for the vintage shall fail, the gathering shall not come. The people that grow the vines for grapes and everything, it takes 5 years to get a vine up to where it produces fruit. And if there are bad years, if there's not enough water, the grapes can't produce. If the locusts come in and eat all the leaves or something else, the vines can't produce. So he's talking about that this vintage fails. You're not going to have food that year. The gathering shall not come. In other words, you're not going to be gathering in the crops from the fields and that sort of stuff. It says, tremble, ye women are at ease. Be troubled, ye careless one. Strip you and make you bare, and gird your sackcloth upon your loins. He's saying, leave these fine clothes that you've got. And he said, and get ready for bad stuff, because it's not going to be great. And that they're going to lament for being able to breastfeed, or they're going to be for the fruit that's going to be on there. Upon the land of my people come up thorns and briars, yea, upon all the houses of joy in the joyous city. I can kind of understand the imagery of the thorns kind of in the desert areas too, because if you're a plant that has something that can be eaten, the animals will eat it. But if you have thorns, you can keep the animals from eating you. And so, that's what they're talking about, is that these type of things that, are not useful to us, we're just going to grow up in abundance and be problems. I was quite struck. I got to spend some time in Vermont and New Hampshire, and was quite struck with something that just totally blew my mind. You would be out riverbanks and everything else and see these plants that looked like they had stickers but they were very small. And so you could actually, have on just heavy socks and just go right through that stuff. And so I used to go fishing in like some tennis shoes and some long soccer socks and shorts and think that, oh my gosh, this stuff's going to eat me alive, this vegetation, but it wasn't like that. Whereas out in West Texas, if I get into the briars and stuff like that, they will puncture you and they will hurt. And so it's a different deal. So they're talking about this stuff growing up that's not going to be good, that the plant's going to protect itself even. Because the palaces shall be forsaken, the multitude of the cities shall be left, the forts and tower shall be dens forever, a joy of wild asses, a pasture of flocks. I kind of think it's interesting when they talk about that, that our world has changed so much. If you look at the history of warfare, having a castle was a good thing. And then along came cannons that could destroy the walls. And so now there are these abandoned castles all over Europe that mean absolutely nothing because the cannon has come along. But now let's go into our technology of things like our fighter jets and lasers and everything else. We can level entire city blocks at nothing, just done. Well, we can even do that with drones. So it doesn't even have to require a person to be involved in any of this real time. It can be somebody who's sitting in an office somewhere and piloting this thing. So it actually is kind of scary with what you're talking about. But they talk about these fortresses and towers, dens, and that only the wild stuff's living in them. They're no longer protective for you. Until the Spirit be poured upon us from on high, and their wilderness be a fruitful field, and the fruitful field be counted for a forest. Then judgment shall dwell in the wilderness, and righteousness remain in the fruitful fold. He's basically telling the people, hold fast, do you, be good, and take heart, and have a solid spirit, that God will take care of you. Respect that, dwell in there and be ready. And he said, in the work of righteousness shall be peace, and the effect of righteousness, quietness and assurance forever. And my people shall dwell in a peaceful habitation, and sure dwellings, and in quiet resting places. When it shall hail coming down on the forest, and the city shall be low in a low place. Blessed are ye that sow beside all waters, that sent forth thither the feet of the ox and the ass. I just think it's funny when you even look at this sowing. I think it's kind of interesting when you look at people now. We are such a technological nation. You know, kids run around with their iPhone or their Android, and they've got it in their hands and everything else. They love playing Minecraft and these games that they build things and everything. But in reality, these kids have never built anything, and very few of them have actually planted seeds and had gardens or anything. They really don't know how this is involved. And even if they do, they have such a short time span in their brain that they think that I'm going to plant this and tomorrow we're going to have a grape or a carrot or whatever. They don't understand that you're going to have some patience. It's going to take some time for this stuff to develop. And you've got things to do in the meantime, too. It's not just putting the seed in the ground, but you got to water it, you got to fertilize it, you got to watch it. I think the word that they used for animals is husbandry. Well, in agriculture, you've got to do kind of the same thing. You've got to be there helping take care of this and make sure it's going. And so he's saying, blessed are those that do get into this planting and sowing. Woe to these that spoilest and that was not spoiled, and dealest treacherously. So he's talking about how that we interact with other people, and watch out that they don't deal treacherously with you. But when and he talks about spoiling and, kind of a lot of those stuff. O Lord, be gracious unto us. We have waited for you. And so he's talking, that he's still waiting for this Messiah 700 years earlier. But we've waited for you. Be their arm every morning, our salvation, and then a time of trouble. He's saying, when all this stuff is going down, we still need you, and we need you at the heart of this. At the noise of the tumult, the people fled. At the lifting of thyself, the nations were scattered. And your spoil shall be gathered like the gathering of the caterpillar, as a running to and fro of locusts shall be a run upon them. Back to this imagery of these critters eating the harvest. And so, in a way, he may even be kind of saying, and I certainly don't get this imagery, but he may even be talking about that if you're not careful and protect you and your family and the people around you and start working on converting people, the people that are not converted are literally being eaten up by this society. And I think we see that. I think that we see human beings literally just being eaten up by evil of what's around them, and and it's kind of like they blindly go. The Lord is exalted, for he dwelleth on high. He's filled Zion with judgment and righteousness, and wisdom and knowledge shall be the stability of the times, and strength of salvation. The fear of the Lord is his treasure. Behold, their valiant ones shall cry without, the ambassadors of peace shall weep bitterly. The highways lie waste, the wayfaring man ceases. He has broken the covenant, he hath despised the cities, he regardeth no man. The earth mourned and languished. Lebanon is ashamed and hewn down. Lebanon has been leveled. Sharon is like a wilderness, and Bashan and Carmel shake off their fruits. Remember, especially Carmel, these are all places in Israel, but Carmel was the site that they had the challenge, where the priests had this deal of who can light this fire, pour water on it, the whole thing that was in Carmel. So when you talk about, God coming through for the prophet, that's where that happened. And so that's what they're still kind of getting into, that area, that zone. He says, now will I rise, saith the Lord, now I will be exalted, now will I lift up myself. You'll conceive shafts and you'll bring forth stubble. And I think that's kind of a sad thing is he's saying that, that he's giving them a threat of what happens, what you are conceiving, what you're giving birth to is not going to be any better. And your breath as fire is going to eat you. It's going to burn you up. And the people shall be as the burnings of time, as thorns cut up shall be burned in the fire. Hear ye that are far off what I have done, and ye that are near acknowledge thy might, my might. The sinners in Zion are afraid. Fearfulness has surprised the hypocrites. Who among you shall dwell with devouring fire? Who among you shall dwell with everlasting burnings? Well, it's who can survive this? Who's going to be able to do that? He that walketh righteously and speaketh uprightly, he that despises the gain of oppressions, that shaketh his hands from holding of bribes, that stops his ears from hearing of blood, and shutteth his eyes from seeing evil, he shall dwell on high. His place of defense shall be the munitions of rocks. Bread shall be given him, his water shall be pure. So there's a lot of imagery in that part deal, but he's just saying how that you should be living even amongst all this evil and all the many things that are happening. And then he goes into the next passage. Micah, we're using Isaiah 700 years before Jesus came, but we're looking at it, and it's going to be a two deal, but we're looking at it in terms of how do you know the Messiah? When the Messiah comes, how do you know it's him? How do you know you're not going to be fooled? And so this is where some of this imagery is going. We started with the dream that the Babylonian king had about the statue, the gold, all the way down, and how that Daniel told him that he was the gold with all these other successive layers. We've dealt with all those, except for the bottom, and we'll get to that somewhere in here, I believe. But I'm using, which is kind of funny because you're saying I'm talking Isaiah 700 years ago, but then I go later to use Daniel imagery to go back to Isaiah and try to help it interpret it, which even gets crazier because when we read some of this too, we're also looking forward to Revelation, which is way beyond all of this, but it all fits like pieces of a puzzle. The weird thing, I must admit, though, is I don't know how the pieces all fit. And so I think it's one of the things that kind of like probably the king of Babylon, he knew all this stuff, but he could actually see it coming and understand what's coming. So maybe we get some peace from that. But anyway, the glorious future. Then eyes shall see the king in his beauty. They shall behold the land that is very far off. And where they're there, do they believe they're talking about Jesus, the king? Your heart shall meditate terror. Where is the scribe? Where is the receiver? Where is he that counteth the towers? Thou shalt not see a fierce people, a people of deeper speech, then thou canst perceive, of a stammering tongue that thou canst not understand. It's somebody stuttering, but you can still, you can understand them, but they're saying, normally you wouldn't be able to. Look upon Zion, the city of our solemnities. Thine eyes shall see Jerusalem, a quiet habitation. A quiet habitation, Jerusalem, right now? Not now. A tabernacle that shall not be taken down. Remember, in Jerusalem with the Wailing Wall, that is the second temple that's been built on that site. And there's going to be a third. And so that's one of the things that they're also talking about here is that there will be a third one built. If you really want to get into when we're having end times, it's when they rebuild that thing. And there are a lot of people that want to. But he's talking figurative too, and I don't fully get all this. But a tabernacle that shall not be taken down, not one of the stakes thereof shall ever be removed, neither shall any of the cords thereof be broken. So part of me actually wonders about this being also what he's talking about figuratively, because when we get to Revelation, we talk about a new Jerusalem. Where that it's the holy city. It's a new Jerusalem, but it's where that the light of God illuminates the whole place. And so it's a different thing. So, you're not sure where in here he's talking about all that, but that's kind of there. Because you kind of get into an area where that you wonder that he is talking about that, because the next deal he says, but there the glorious Lord will be unto us a place of broad rivers and streams, wherein shall go no galley with oars, neither shall giant ship pass thereby. For the Lord is our judge, the Lord is our lawgiver, the Lord is our king. He will save us. And it's like, that whole verse, our Lord is mighty to save. The tacklings are loosened, they cannot well strengthen their mast, they cannot spread the soil. Then is the prey of a great spoil divided, the lame take the prey. And the inhabitants shall not say, I am sick. The people that dwell there shall be forgiven their iniquity. And so they're talking about what is this Messiah going to look like? What's he going to do? Because they're talking about things that we would truly understand as being things of our world and now and even in the future. But I think he's looking at things further beyond that. And when I say that, when they're giving us some imagery there that we can't miss, because when they talk about that you don't need oars, no galley with oars, that no ships pass by, and some of the things that they're even talking about in here, they're saying that water's there, but we don't need to fish. We don't need the ships to get in that water to do any of that stuff. Their tacklings are loosed when they then they could not well strengthen their mast. What they're talking about there, it's still a nautical thing, but you have the mast of a ship, but then for that thing to stay in place, you have to have lines that come down that hold that mast into place. And without that mast can move. And so it's important that those lines are tight. But he's saying that here that the tacklings are loosened, they could not well strengthen their mast, that they could not spread the sail. In other words, if that thing is loose and everything, you can't put a sail up and you can't sail. But anyway, and he's talking about the sick, their iniquities forgiven. Come near, you nations, to hear, and hearken, you people. Let the earth hear, and all that is therein. This is 34. Moved on. And all things that come forth of it. For the indignation of the Lord is upon all nations, and his fury upon all their armies. He has utterly destroyed them. He has delivered them to the slaughter. Okay, if you look at that statue that we talked about in Daniel, where are we? Are we at the gold? Are we at the silver, the bronze, the iron? I think we're all the way down at the feet of clay. And the other thing that is going to be that we're going to be seeing in the future and looking at and talking about, but it's interesting because the statue, these are unified ones. Now we're getting the splits because at the legs, you get splits, you got 2 feet, but it's going to be even more split than that because you have 10 toes. And so I believe that from what we know here, we're looking about 10 nations as a 10-nation confederation that somehow gets together. And we know in Revelation we're talking about the Antichrist. Somehow those 10 get together but have one person in charge of all of them. So when you wonder about all those powerful people taking those jets and flying to that country and all meeting together in this summit, doesn't it kind of make you wonder? Anyway. For the indignation of the Lord is upon all nations. It's everything. He's utterly destroyed them. He has delivered them to the slaughter. Their slain shall be cast out, and their stink shall come up out of their carcasses, and the mountains shall be melted with their blood. Very, very dark imagery. And all the host of heaven shall be dissolved, and the heavens shall be rolled together as a scroll, and all their hosts shall fall down as the leaf falleth off from the vine, as a falling fig from the fig tree. And so I'm going to stop a little before we get into this next part, because this next part is really thick and it has a lot of good stuff in it. But we kind of have to break it and put it together. When he's talking about falling fig from the fig tree, it makes you wonder. Like I said, I don't have all this imagery, but I think some of it I probably can kind of put together. Because I know I've preached on it before. The fig tree that's outside of Jerusalem, that Jesus comes up. Do you remember the deal with that? Because we'll get to that. Jesus is walking along and he sees the fig tree and he goes to it and he expects to find figs. And there's no figs. He doesn't destroy the tree, he just curses it, walks on, and the fig tree dies. But the point of that message, and we're going to get to this fig tree, the point of that message is that the city of Jerusalem had this beautiful temple that they had built. We had 2 majestic temples, but is the second one more majestic than the first? I don't know. I never saw the thing. But Solomon's temple is the one he's talking about. That's what's there now, when Jesus was there. But it's, you're walking up, there's this huge, massive, beautiful temple. Today, you'd see the Dome of the Rock, and you'd see the Gold Dome. But let's take the Gold Dome away and go back to, there's this temple, 4 square walls, and, incredible. Well, their mission Their job was to be a light to all people, a light to all nations. They were supposed to be the billboard that says, all you come here, we will treat you right. We're going to show you God. We're going to be a good people. All those things is what they're supposed to be doing. But was the temple what was happening there? Was that what was really happening? Or were there money changers in the temple and all the mean things that he came in and scattered them out? The fig tree at that, and Jesus obviously would know when, the fig tree should have had leaves and fruit. In other words, Jesus knows more than we do about the plants, but when he sees that tree, he says, oh good, I'll go over there and get something to eat. Because that tree is advertising. That tree's a billboard. It's got all these beautiful leaves that say, hey, I'm a fig tree. Come over here. And he gets there and it doesn't have any fruit. Just like the city doesn't have any fruit. Okay? So when he's talking here, the fig tree, he says in here that the like he talks to heaven, we scrolled up, but their host, meaning the people, fall down as a leaf falling off the vine and as a falling fig from the fig tree, things coming down. But when he talks, and there's some imagery here and even about what is the fig tree is actually some of the nations, they also look at as the nations to the south there. So it's kind of an interesting imagery with all of this, but it ties his back. This is something that's before Jesus came. 700 years, but talking about the fig tree. Okay. For my sword shall be bathed in heaven. Behold, it shall come down upon Edomiah. In other words, some of the translations say Edom. And all the people of my curse of judgment. The sword of the Lord is filled with blood. Is made fat with fatness, with the blood of lambs and goats and the fat of the kidneys of rams. For the Lord has a sacrifice in Bozrah and a great slaughter in the land of Edom. This imagery, I kind of wonder and I kind of sit back with, and it makes me really ponder what they're kind of looking at this. Because when you're talking blood and you're talking sword and you're talking this stuff, and maybe I need to get a little further too, because he's also got this imagery of, and it may depend on your translation. Let me see. No, it's still kind of in here. Depending on your translation, they talk about this person that's coming, and it may be a little further too. But this person that's coming, this Messiah that they're talking about, and this is even beyond us, I think, is they talk about his garments being red. The Greek word erythema being red with blood. So you hear this sword covered in blood. They're giving you imagery of animals, sheep and goats. Do we have imagery of what does that mean? You know, he talks about the sheep and the goats, you know. You're my flock, and then there's the goats. And if you get into the imagery even in Daniel, and I believe it's Daniel 6, there's imagery about there will be this ram, and the ram has 2 horns. Here comes this goat with 1, and the goat comes in and kills the one with 2, and he's more powerful, and nobody can stop him and all this stuff. He's talking figuratively, but we're seeing some of the same imagery in Isaiah before Daniel talking about this. But I guess what I'm trying to get to with this is there's this battle. We know there's this battle. We know this battle happens because there's blood and there's sword and everything else. And this battle is going to be led by Jesus. But what makes me really wonder is when we're talking about this battle, remember, it's not just a battle, and they talk about going to Edom, which is to the south. You know, Edom has always been a place that has kind of been less than ideal for them in the way, because you had Jacob and Esau and that whole deal, and then Esau got sent out to Edom, and his family lived there, and there have been, you know, that family divided and that sort of stuff. So Edom is kind of that deal. They're like the fig tree is another imagery for them. But they are not the true believers as when you look at it. They're the other people. They're the ones that are out there that are not us. which also is kind of a bad way to say it, but you get what I'm saying. And so this army of God is going to be coming from that area, and they're going to be taking over, and they're going to be cleaning it up. But there's also, and this is what gets really crazy if you really think about it, it's not just what's happening as an earthly battle. There's a spiritual war going on here too. And this spiritual war is what we're looking at in so many ways when we get into Revelation of what's happening in our world now. You know, what is heading towards this Antichrist? Because this Antichrist may be an earthly person, but remember, they're not. They're not just an earthly person. They're an evil. They're from the fallen angels and all this other evil that we have that from the beginning of time, you know, whether you want to call him Lucifer or Satan or whatever, that is their representative on earth. This Antichrist is a spiritual person, not just a leader. They're totally evil. Evil. Which I love using that because Micah in Hebrew, they don't have superlatives. For us, we do. You go to a store and they say good, better, best, superlatives. Good, better, best. Hebrew, they don't have that. They don't use that. So to emphasize the good, better, best, evil. So the 6, maybe, just so you know, putting Hebrew in words, in thoughts. They talk about the mark of the beast being 6. It's the repetition of the numbers. Evil. Where does 6 come from? And I'm not a scholar on this stuff, don't get me wrong, but 6 is man. 7 is God, right? 7 days he created, 7 days he rested. 6th day is man. So man, or evil. We're not talking God, right? So this Antichrist, what are they going to have? I don't know, but they're going to be totally evil. And like I said, I do believe there's going to be some kind of 10-nation confederation that works with them. And so this war is going on. This Messiah is coming. This Messiah is covered in blood. His sword is covered in the blood of sheep and goats. And the fat of the ram. And, you know, like, what is happening? He's cleaning the house. And there'll be a great slaughter in the land of Edom. Now, like I said, it's probably both. It's a spiritual and a physical earthly war. And the unicorn shall come down with them, and the bullocks with the bulls, and their land shall be soaked with blood, and their dust made fat with fatness. You know, when he says fat with fatness, I think he's really trying to say it's like oily. You know, for it is the day of the Lord's vengeance and the year of recompenses for the controversy of Zion. And the streams thereof shall be turned into pitch. You know, pitch is black oily stuff that they used to use in the Middle Ages for battles. They would take pitch. I think you get it probably from, it's probably an oil substance that you can find any place. It's got an oil pit, and you take it, and they'd put it on the walls, and as the people tried to storm the castle, they'd pour pitch on them and light it, and so they'd burn. And so he's talking, that's what the rivers are. Streams are pitch. The dust is brimstone. Brimstone is kind of the stuff you get when you've been building fires, and it's the garbage that stays behind. It's hot and no good for anything. And the land thereof shall become burning pitch. It shall not be quenched night or day. The smoke thereof shall go up forever, and from generation to generation it shall lie waste. None shall pass through it forever and ever. Now, when he talks about this imagery of this smoke and everything else, to me, it kind of gives me this image, if you think back, of the Iraq War, when as the Americans were coming, they set the oil fields on fire, and you just see the smoke coming up, and it was just, you know, black and ugly. Kind of the image I think I get. But the cormorant and the bittern shall possess it, the owl also and the raven shall dwell in it, and he shall stretch out upon a line of confusion, and the stones of emptiness. So when we talk about a raven, maybe an owl not so much, but a raven, what does a raven do? And there's been biblical things. The raven was in the ark. The raven was the first bird they sent out, not the dove. Why they sent out the raven? Probably because he's a strong bird, but he's probably also not stupid enough to go too far and he'll come back. He's kind of a little crafty. But they also clean up garbage. And I didn't understand this until here we have buzzards, right? You don't have crows. In fact, in the future, we've started getting some crows actually, which is kind of weird. Our world's changing. But if you read the far side, I never understood the crows until somebody explained to me crows clean up the highways. They're picking up the dead stuff. They see the crows, we see the buzzards. Our buzzards probably wouldn't make it in the northern states. Probably too cold, the winters, you know. Buzzards are very fascinating because they don't fly real well. They have to have heat to try to get up to altitude. So they actually more like gliders, and they get the thermals and they start going up. And so we don't have the ravens and the crows, but those are what clean up the ravens that go in and pick up the bodies and do all that kind of stuff. And they shall call the nobles thereof to the kingdom, and none shall be there, and all their princes shall be nothing. Saying the nations are really nothing. The thorns shall come up in their palaces, and nettles and brambles in the fortresses thereof, and it shall be a habitation of dragons and a court for owls. The wild beasts of the desert shall also come up. The wild beasts of the desert shall also meet with the wild beasts of the island, and the satyr will cry to his fellow. The screech owl also shall rest there and finds for itself a place of rest. There shall the great owl make her nest and lay and hatch and gather under her shadow. There shall be the vultures also be gathered. There we go. Every one with her mate. Seek out the book of the Lord and read. Is this what they're talking about? Probably. Seek out the book of the Lord and read. No one of these shall fail. None shall want her mate, for my mouth it has commanded me, and in spring it has gathered them. He has cast the lot for them, and his hand hath divided it into them by line. They shall possess it forever, from generation to generation shall they dwell therein. In other words, God really is drawing a line, just like at the Alamo. Okay, if you're with us, get on this side, and if you're not, get on that side. God's drawing a line. The wilderness and the solitary place shall be glad for them. At this point, I do want to make a point. 35, we now move away from the doom and gloom, the oh my gosh, it's all bad, this is what's happening, this is what's coming, all the bad, we're walking out of the storm. Because 35 is changing, and that's why I want to make sure that I stop here and let you know we're going to get a change. Because 35 is going to be a lot of the stuff that I'm going to use next week. The wilderness and the solitary places should be glad for them, and the desert shall rejoice and blossom as the rose. One of the fascinating things that we got to do, because our guys know the country, and Israel's not a big place, but we got to go see it. We were out in the wilds, and they took us to a place. And you got to understand, biblically, this was the area that David and his mighty men hung out. We know that stuff. Well, we stop at this place, and you're kind of like, why are we here? There's some hills over here, desert here, not much here. Why are we here? There's nothing even green. And then we started walking, and we walked into the brown, and as we came around a corner into this brown, there was a spring that was coming from the wall up there around us, and water was dripping down off of ferns and green. And we got to take our shoes off and kind of walk into this. It feels really hot there, but we get into this really cool pool. The kids, they're adults, they're young adults, but they were kids. I mean, sometimes they're chunking each other in it and whatever, and it was just like, who would ever think that this is here? But yet they knew it. And the biblical lesson they were talking to, because these were the kind of places that Dave and his group could go hide out in, because they knew they were there, and survive there. Without water, you're dead in the desert. Well, this is there. So I think that's beautiful imagery to say they shall blossom abundantly and even rejoice and sing and joy. And the glory of Lebanon shall be given into it, the excellency of Carmel and Sharon. They shall see the glory of the Lord and the excellency of our God. Like I said, when you're talking about those places, he's talking about places like Carmel where the priests came and all that stuff. Those are holy or nice places. And so he's saying they're restored. Strengthen ye the weak hands and confirm the feeble knees. And so, strengthen the people who can't walk or have, strokes, fix those. Say to them that are of a fearful heart, be strong, fear not. Behold, your God will come with vengeance. Even God with a recompense, he will come and save you. Then the eyes of the blind shall be opened, and the ears of the deaf shall be unstopped. Then shall the lame man leap as a hart, which is a deer, and the tongue of the dumb sing, for in the wilderness shall waters break out, and streams in the desert. And the parched ground shall become a pool, and the thirsty land springs of water in the habitation of dragons, where each lay shall be grass with reeds and rushes. And a highway shall be there, and a way, and it shall be called the way of holiness. The unclean shall not pass over it, but it shall be for those, the wayfaring men, though fools shall not err therein. No lion shall be there, nor any ravenous beast shall go up thereon. It shall not be found there, but the redeemed shall walk there. And the ransomed of the Lord shall return and come to Zion with songs and everlasting joy upon their heads. They shall obtain joy and gladness, and sorrow and singing shall flee away. So I really like this last imagery when they're talking about this, because we went from all this dark stuff, all this bad stuff. We're now going to have a highway for the righteous. And the highway imagery, and like I said, going back a little bit more, he talks about these pools and the water becomes green. And it kind of gives me the imagery that we've fixed our earth. We fixed the problems. I'd say we. God fixed. Let's back up. God fixed the earth. Because in Genesis, it is interesting because we don't ever get mentions of rain in Genesis, that the dew in the morning moisturized everything else. But it's not Houston, it's not 80% and 80 degrees. The Garden of Eden would have been cool and moist, like parts of Hawaii that I've been to at different times. It would be a garden that basically doesn't need rain because there's enough moisture, the ground stays moist. You know, you're not walking on thorns. We're talking about that. We're not walking on the stuff that hurts you. It's a beautiful place. And so he's saying that this gets restored. Now, when do we use highway images? Well, you know, let's say you're just going to go take off through a forest or through a pasture or something. You know, there's things that make you stumble, and it's harder to get through, and there's all this stuff, and you may have to go around trees. A highway is an easy place to walk. It's smooth. It's great. So there's a highway, but only the righteous get to use it. Is it a path to somewhere? Yeah, path to somewhere. But we're looking at a restoration of our world when he gets into this imagery, I think. You know, it gets restored. There's nothing there to attack you. No lion's going to come eat you. Nothing like that. But the redeemed shall walk there. And the redeemed of the Lord shall return and come to Zion with songs and everlasting joy upon their heads. They shall obtain joy and gladness, and sorrow and sighing shall flee away. Is that also a reflection of what you're going to read in Revelation when it gets to there are no tears in heaven? So, I want to start with that, but for this next week, I want you to think, if Jesus comes back, I say, Dad, I keep saying the if. When? I don't know why I say if. When? When Jesus comes back, how are you going to know he's the Messiah? And so I've given you all this imagery, all these things. And if you do want to read ahead, you can start with Matthew and think about what kind of things in Matthew they said, this is him. This is the Messiah. And so that's where we're going to go next, is how do we know it's the Messiah? The Messiah. Abby said, what are you preaching on? I said, Messiah. And I said, actually, let me add a definite article. The Messiah. Because there's only one. And so how do you know it's the Messiah? And I'll leave you with that.